I'm Kubair Shirazee, and I'm here to talk to you about Agile product development. But what I'm going to do is present more of a practical guide as opposed to take you through what Agile is. I'm assuming everyone over here is all familiar with what Agile is. So this is more about how do you make Agile work for yourself, especially given that I'm assuming most of us run small agencies over here, which run multiple products and projects on the go. If you're completely project focused, you might have aspirations to develop products. So the question is, how do you balance the two without compromising the client's work? So I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself to begin with, so it kind of puts things in perspective. I've been around for a while. I'm basically, you could say, an open source and an emerging tech values. I love anything that is kind of hot off the heels of anything to do with tech, be it gadgets, be it software, be it hardware. And at the heart of it, I love developing products, markets, and relationships. The last one being the most important one is relationships. I've been doing Agile since 1998. In those days, we didn't call it Agile. We used to call it rapid application development. Some people used to call it rapid prototyping. That kind of fell into. Anyone here knows what DSDM is? Thank God. So then came along DSDM, we stepped into Agile, and then we got Scrum, and then we got extreme programming, blah, 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 blah. So I think Agile, we've all been doing Agile since day one. We've just given it different labels as we've gone along, and Agile, being Agile, has evolved over time. Has become better, it's become leaner. So continuing with very quickly, what I've been up to since 1998, I started life as a productpreneur. So I started my own company, and the whole aim was to build products, take them to market. I've sold 4 tech companies, built 8 products of my own. 6 were awesome, 2 were not so awesome, but then I kind of disagree with that. I think all of them were awesome. So the 6 were the ones that actually got the sales. At the same time, I've also been a servicepreneur, which basically means I finance all my products through client work. So I've delivered over 30 products, God knows how many 100 projects, and it's all been done Agile. But the most awesome product that I ever built throughout my journey so far was my team. So regardless of how many products I built for clients or how many products I built for my own ventures, the most incredible thing that I developed over time was the team. A team that knew what Agile is, what Agile should be, and how to evolve Agile internally in your own agencies and companies. Because if you keep doing Agile just as it is out of the box and you don't adapt it to your own environment, to your own client projects, to your own ecosystem, then in my opinion, you're not really doing Agile. You're just kind of like following the herd. And that's not going to get you anywhere. But it might get you somewhere, but it's not going to be the differentiator between your agency and the monoliths out there that we are all facing. I changed that freaking because someone complained at my last presentation, even though we're all above 18 over here. But today is all about agility and how to develop products in an Agile way. So without further ado, I'll jump into it. Firstly, you've got to know which tools to use. There are many flavors of Agile out there. There are about 3-4 flavors of Agile out there. But you've got to know which Agile to use for which project. So for instance, I'll start off with DSDM. DSDM because DSDM is one of the oldest and the heaviest Agile methodologies out there. It's very heavy on documentation. When I say very heavy, it's not half as heavy as Prince2 and the others are, but still, it is quite heavy on documentation. There are a lot of artifacts, there are a lot of ceremonies, but you know what? All that documentation is great because it taps in nicely into Prince2, which the government loves. So if you're pitching for big projects out there, especially UK government, UK digital services, etc., you want to use DSDM because that is what's going to make them comfortable. If you mention Scrum or Scrumban, they'll run away because they want everything to be plugged into nicely plugged into Prince2, which actually lacks a delivery methodology. It's a really good documentation project management methodology, but it doesn't really tell you how to deliver. That's where Atom fits in. Then we move across to the next methodology, which is, as you guessed, Scrum. Scrum, in my opinion, has got a really nice balance of its artifacts, documentation, and ceremonies. It's taken everything that we would practically take out of the SDM and practice, and it's kind of put that into a nice structure. So it's got your Scrum Master who's responsible for the rules, because you know what, in Agile, we all break rules, because for some reason, subconsciously, we think, hey, this is Agile. I don't need to do this. I can get away with not doing that. So you need someone over there who plays the referee and goes, look, you really need to attend the 10-minute stand-up. Or the 10-minute stand-up can't be in the evening in the park. Or your product backlog has to be maintained on a weekly basis, etc. So you do need those rules out there. Excuse me. Then you've got your team, you've got your product owner. Most of us will end up playing dual roles because it's very rare, in the audience I have, and in fact it's very rare in practice that you will have the luxury, unless you're a big company, you'll have the luxury of having a dedicated Scrum Master, a team that is not disrupted, because one of the things about Agile is you can't break up the team and say, you know what, Alistair, today you're not working on this project, today you're working on the RBS project, and next week we will have you back. You can't do that. But in reality, that's exactly what happens. So we all play multiple roles. So your product owner might be the Scrum Master. It's not ideal, but that's how it pans out in practice. So when that happens, you've got to wear distinct and different hats. So you've got to almost like, kind of like split yourself up into these two roles and say, okay, I'm the product owner when I'm talking to the client, when I'm looking at the backlog, when I'm prioritizing the backlog with the client and my team. But right now, I'm a Scrum Master because this is the 10-minute stand-up, or this is the retrospective happening, or this is the sprint planning meeting happening. So you keep switching your hats. And that will make sure that you don't bloat. Because as an Agile organization, what you don't want is too many people sitting around doing specific things, because that's going to cost you money. And if it's bleeding money, you're no longer Agile. Then, this is one of my favorites. This is Scrumban. Scrumban, everyone familiar with Kanban? Yep, cool. So Scrumban is essentially Scrum, but with floodgates. Why? Because it's all about the flow that you'll sell. If you've got multiple projects running, and you don't have a flow control or a whip control process in place, it's going to become an absolute nightmare for the delivery team. It might be okay for the hunters who go out and bring new business, but as far as the delivery team is concerned, estimation is going to become a problem, delivery is going to become a problem, quality is going to become a problem. So what Kanban on top of Scrum does is it gives you that room where you can say no, where your production managers or even your sales guys or your senior management, nursing about hay fever, where they know what is possible in the next 2, 6, 8, 12 weeks, etc. So I don't need to tell you any more about this. It just puts the floodgates on the fly. So it makes sure that what you're delivering is quality. You're not overworked. You're not overcommitting. And you can maintain your velocity. Everyone here familiar with velocity? Yeah. So if you're doing Agile, it takes about 2, 3 sprints to get to your velocity. But once you've got your velocity, what will happen is the sales guy and people like me will go, okay, brilliant, that's your velocity, you're going to keep chucking more work at you. But that's where you've got to draw a line in the sand and say, actually, no, I'm not going to take on any work because that's my whip limit and these are the projects I'm working on. So you have multiple tiers of Scrumban boards. So what you'll have is a Scrumban board which is for the team and a project, then you'll have a Scrumban board which is for the program manager, so it'll have multiple programs, projects on there, and then you'll have a Scrumban board for the client, then you'll have a Scrumban board for the execs in the business if you're a larger organization. So, where do you go from here? You've got to know your environment. So you've got to know your ecosystem that you're operating in. You've got to know your limitations. You've got to know your boundaries. And once you kind of know all of that, you kind of like chop all the crap away. And you take the parts of Agile which really work for you and you adapt them to your way of working, to your clients, to your projects and your products. So, is that Agile? Yes, no, maybe?
Right, visualization, yeah, it looks Agile.
It looks Agile, right? It's Agile, but it's not practical. Why? Because, look at that. You've got one massive delivery coming out. Yes, it's making you money at the end of it, but what about all these iterations? Could you release something here? And then I see people doing this. And I ask them, still Agile, but what are you doing? Why? Because there are numbers here. There's no objective. Even if you're using Agile for a client, what the client wants to know is, what is this deliverable going to give me? Is it going to help me increase sales? Is it going to bring my costs down? Is it going to get me a larger user base? What is it doing for me? So this is Agile, absolutely. But in my opinion, it's completely useless. That's Agile. That's what I call practical Agile. So you've got multiple deliveries of multiple sizes and weights happening. You might find that this one of the smallest deliveries you make brings in the most amount of money. You might find you did a huge 4-week sprint and released a whole bunch of features, but you only got a little bit of money in return from it. So ROI is essential when it comes to being practical with Agile, or being practical, full stop. ROI is essential. You've got to always keep your eye on the ball. What am I getting out of it? What is my client getting out of it? What is this release going to mean as far as the money meant? Because even if you're working on a product that's not your own for your client's got the same issue, which is at the end of the day, if you go and cross-sell or upsell stuff, their finance guys are going to say, okay, so what is it exactly that Pod's given you that that justifies me spending more money on this product? That's where your client needs to, or your client-side product owner needs to say, well, we just released a small release and our ROI equates to this. So ROI, what does it mean? It's not always cash. Most people think in terms of the money they're going to get. And this is critical when you're talking to your clients about ROI. ROI is good user experience. It's a happy, content user. Not your stakeholders, because you know what, if your users, there's a balance between making your stakeholders happy and making your end users happy. And usually I find that I focus more on the end users because the stakeholders I can handle, but the end users, they've got the numbers. So your end users need to be happy. They need to be talking about your product or the product that you're delivering. And they need to be talking to the right audience. So they need to be talking to prospects, to their peers. Why? Because you want to grow your user base. You want to stand out. Once you achieve this, you'll have evangelists. Once you've got evangelists, your sales are going to go up. Then, don't forget, another thing you want to concentrate is on reducing your costs, because that's also part of Agile and Lean. What we want to do is we want to deliver something that is going to not only increase our user base, make us really popular in the product community, but at the same time, it's going to make maintainability of that particular product low. The cost of maintenance is going to go down. And of course, you want to be a thought leader so that everyone talks about you. That's how you grow your business. Now, moving on to practical tips. So first is backlog grooming. What exactly does it mean? Well, we all know less is more. But what does it mean? We all know quality versus quantity. Quantity is crap, quality is everything. And a constant stream of new features is overrated. In fact, whenever I'm working on a product or a project and I see new features coming in from the client, I draw a line in the sand and I go, I don't want to talk about new features. My team is not even going to look at these new features. We're going to focus on what we have right now. So for instance, it's an analogy is, let's just go out and build a new bridge because this bridge only has 2 lanes. Why don't we work on the existing bridge and expand that and scale it, as opposed to investing? Really interested to find out what's going on there. As opposed to investing in completely new infrastructure. So, how do you go about that? You've got to analyze your existing processes first. So, there are two places where I always go for this. First is my usage logs and my support logs. The second is I talk to my support team or the client support team. So the questions are, okay, so how many existing features are being used the most on a daily basis? So you've got a user base of 100,000 users, and they're only using 25%, 30, 40% of the software, then I don't want to concern myself with the other 60%. I want to focus on that 40%, and I want to make that even better. I want to evolve that into something that's going to get them, A, it's going to increase their satisfaction, and B, it's going to get them engaging with the other features. Because remember, features depend on features. So if you've got features in your application that no one's using, that means that the route to those features is broken. And you've got to fix it by looking at the features that are being used in the first instance. So concentrate on the features that get used the most, and concentrate on designing new processes, A/B testing. It's all about the user experience, not the UI, but the end user experience. So what I'll do is, for instance, going back many, many moons ago, I designed a talent management system. And what we did was we split certain processes out, which were lengthy, into smaller chunks to see how it works out. And it didn't work out at all. Users absolutely hated it. But the majority didn't, because we sliced our A/B test into 5 and 95%. Anything less than that, we wouldn't have got the results back. But anything more than that, we would have disrupted the wider audience. So these ratios you want to be careful of. When you're doing A/B testing, you want to make sure that you don't go for a 50-50 split. I know a lot of people talk about a 50-50 split, but I don't believe in that, because that can end up upsetting 50% of your users. And then to roll back, you lose credibility. It's easier to rebuild your credibility with 5 or 10% of your audience than it is with 50%. Especially when they find out that, hey, it was a micro-failed experiment. As a user, I'm like, why am I your guinea pig? Why? So always remember, when it comes to Agile, draw a line in the sand. Yeah, you're in charge, you're the product owner, you're the project manager, you're the scrum master, whichever hat you're wearing, you have to draw. There will be a point when you have to draw a line in the sand, because if you don't, it's no longer going to be Agile. It's just going to be clusterfuck. That's what it's going to be. Moving on to more practical tips. Schedule dedicated revenue, cost, and margin-focused sprints. So this is coming back to drawing a line in the sand and saying, look, we're not working on any new features. We're not working on any of the features that we've been talking to me about, Alistair, because the next 2 sprints, or the next 2 weeks, the next sprint is solely focused on cost reduction. So going back to what I was talking about earlier, we're going to look at our support logs. We look at usage, we talk to the users, and we go, okay, so where are we bleeding time and money in terms of supporting this application? Where is our client bleeding time and money in terms of maintaining and supporting this application? Bless you. Or you look at the revenue model and you say, okay, so how do we increase our margins? How do we get more sales in? By improving the existing infrastructure, the existing features. What do we do? Because remember, it's not just about the software, it's about the hardware, it's about the holistic system. So your Agile approach has to take all of those things into account. It's not just about your team going away and working on a backlog. It's about your sales team knowing what's coming out in the next sprint and preparing the market for it. So release planning isn't just about the release. Release planning is about your entire business. It's about how you're going to go and break the news to your client that, you know, that feature that your MD really wants, I'm not giving it to you. Why? Because it's more essential we address this maintenance issue that's going to reduce your cost of support, or it's going to help us with, you know, the server leaks, the memory leaks we're having on the server. The MD is not going to he's not going to be concerned, she's not going to be concerned about that, but as the product owner, as the leader on the product or the project, you have to find your ground. And that's one of the hardest challenges, that I've had over the years, is saying no to people who don't usually hear no. We're talking about chief execs, we're talking about board members, you know, because they push their weight around. So if you can't provide me with these features, I'm sure another supplier can. Oh yes, definitely. But you know how long the handover is? How long it's going to take another supplier to come and pick up what I'm doing and my team is doing? Yeah, sure. All I'm asking you is 2 weeks. The handover is going to take about 6 months. So where do you want to go? So don't be hesitant to throw it back in their face. Why? Because you've got to like almost say, look, you might be the alpha in the boardroom, but when it comes to delivering this stuff and making you money and getting this project to be a huge success for you, that's my gig. And you're not going to come and piss on my territory. So always remember, draw a line in the sand, be firm. I'm not saying start fighting your clients, but be firm. Show them why exactly is it that you're being stubborn about something. And they will see reason because you're essentially fighting their corner. Or you're essentially fighting corner for the product. So it's better for the product. Okay, so new features. All of us do need to build new features in. So having selected new features for the last 5 minutes, moving on to new features. So how do you exactly decide you're going to build some new features into it? You analyze the demand. And you engage with the users. So when it comes to analyzing the demand, once again, it's not just about talking to the users. It's also about looking at the logs. So it's looking at where those features, existing features, aren't being used. So if someone's going from A to D but falling off, why exactly is it? Because E's broken, or maybe E is something that was never required, or E needs a bridge between D and E. So you've got to look at, excuse me, so you've got to analyze the demand both from a systemic level as well as a wider user engagement level. To talk to the users, look at your support logs, talk to your support team, engage with the users, and you'll find out where the demand is. Hold workshops, hold roadshows. If you're looking at a bigger product, so for instance, one of the products that I was in charge of many moons ago had 400 installations in 480 hospitals. And we couldn't run 2-week sprints on that because the user base was 1.2 million people. So if you get that wrong, you're going to end up pissing off some minister in the Department of Health, and that's not going to be very healthy for my health and my team's health. So we did roadshows. So we would go out and talk to different regions. So we do a roadshow in Leeds, we do one in Scotland, we go to Glasgow, we go to Edinburgh, we go to Bristol, we go to Birmingham, and we do all of this in the span of 1 week. So we had our own roadshow sprint. So we go and talk to everyone, prepare everyone, see what the demand is going forward, and then decide with the users what the priority has to be. What do you need over here in these kind of circumstances is user champions. So they're going to be people within the user community who understand the product inside out, who understand how Agile works, so the product owners. But they're going to be the people who are going to fight your corner as far as the wider user community is concerned. Only then invest in new features. Coming back to the whole ROI model, so you know this new feature is going to bring usage up, it's going to bring revenue up, it's going to bring costs down, it's going to make the users happy. Simple color change might just make the users happy. And it might be like, you might want to give them a new feature where they can select their own skin. We did that many, many moons ago on a product where we just added a new feature, upload your own skin. And it was amazing how happy people were by just uploading their own images in the background. Stay on top of your game. What that basically means is know your market, know your competition, know the market forces. Develop and engage with and evolve continuously different business models. So always have, just like you'd have a Scrum board in the office, always have a SWOT map in the office. Always have an entity map in the office. So that you're constantly reminded of where your strengths are, what are the weaknesses of your competitors, what are the opportunities in the market, what are the users' pains and gains. Is everyone here familiar with entity maps? No? Okay. Look it up. It's one of the most awesome models I've ever come across. Completely in love with them. You can draw them for everything. From how am I going to convince Mrs. Shirazee to let me buy that new car, to how am I going to engage with this new prospect that I have who's already talking to a really large agency, but how can I get into this prospect's mind? It's all about looking at the current state, the future state, how you're going to take your client from the current state to the future state. What does your user or your client think, see, do, hear? How do they act? And then from that, you determine their pain points. And by engaging with you, what do they gain? Because at the end of the day, if I have nothing to give that is going to be of benefit to you, why the hell would you have a conversation? Right? So you've got to know that before the conversation happens. You've got to know that why is it that Leeds City Council would benefit from having a conversation? And then it's those gain points that you've got to put in front of people, get in front of them, and sell them the bigger picture. Essentially, study your ecosystem. That's what I'm saying. That's also part of Agile. And it kind of like sounds like doesn't have anything to do with development, but you know what? Agile isn't just about our developers. It's about the wider picture. So, what does practical Agile mean? It means you constantly communicate. It means you broadcast as well as narrowcast, sometimes at the same time. Treat your users as a community. Build a product community. So if you're not into products, build a community around your ability to deliver projects for a particular client. So if you're working with, say, Leeds City Council, develop a community that absolutely loves what your company X does for Leeds City Council within Leeds City Council. So you have your own community, of your own fan base within Leeds City Council. Or if you're developing a product, you develop a community of users and you support that community around it. Give your community a voice, be it via Twitter, social media channels, be it through user voice, be it through your support desk, be it through any means necessary, be it through snail mail. But give them a voice. And then listen to them, what they're saying, react to it, and let them know that you're reacting to whatever they're saying. Because they want to know you're listening, you're not just hearing, you're listening. That is critical. So let them know you're reacting to what you're listening, what you're hearing them say, you're listening to them. Learn from that experience and adapt constantly. That's what agility is. Constantly evolving, progressing, getting better at it. Create your own service or product ecosystem. Crowdsource your backlog, which means you crowdsource your sales, you crowdsource, like Alistair and I, when we were just having a conversation on, how do you go out and find new prospects to hunt? Talk to your existing clients. They're going to put you through to new prospects. Trick I always use, is being broadcaster, so anyway, too late, is I always say I have tough quarterly targets. And the relationships I've developed with the clients, they empathize with me. They go like, shit, Kubair's going to be a hit stream if I don't help them out. So okay, you know what? I've got to make a talk to him and maybe you can get in front of him. Something might happen, something might not. 50-50, but the point is, you're now in front of someone that you didn't know previously. So differentiate your products by creating a community. And then once you've created that community, differentiate yourself within that community through your agility. So they know that you deliver stuff, and what you deliver changes the user experience and always makes it better. Offer value and benefits to your product community. Everyone here familiar with Maslow? Pyramid of needs? Yeah. Study Maslow. It's awesome. If you study Maslow in the context of a client and you use empathy maps in the process, the results you can get are absolutely fascinating. Your users will tell you what they want and when they want it, but you're not going to let them decide when they get it. Why? Because your sprint cycles or your sprint strategy might not allow you to do that. Why? Because you might have a maintenance sprint coming up. You might have a migration sprint coming up. The users don't care about it. The users just want what they want, and they'll tell you that they want it yesterday, or they needed it yesterday. Whenever I hear my clients say, I needed that yesterday, I always ask them, so does that mean you don't need it today? And you won't need it tomorrow, in which case we can just ignore it and drop it off the backlog. And so that's just one way of making them realize that there are needs that we as a developer and technologists have that we are putting on the back burner to address their needs first. So sometimes our needs have to come first. Why? Because we're thinking about scalability, maintainability. We're thinking about stability of the system. And if we keep putting their needs first, then you know what? Everyone's needs are going to disappear when the system fails and falls over. So decide when you're going to give them what they want, and then communicate to them. But look, this is going to come out in sprint 3, sprint 4, sprint 9. You know, this ain't going to happen. Like from the DSDM world, we used to call it Moscow rules. Scrum guys don't call it Moscow. I kind of like it. So it's must-have, should-haves, could-haves, and won't-haves. In the Scrum world, you don't really have the won't-haves. In the DSDM world, line in the sand world, you're not going to get it. Full stop. You're just not going to get it. It adds absolutely zero value. So not happening. Failure is not an option, but obviously failure is not the objective either. Always design micro-failure experiments. So this is A/B testing. So let your developers, let your analysts, let your clients engage with your users, come up with new ways to do existing processes, and then do A/B testing. Not for long, do it for a week. And once again, keep the ratio small and see how it goes. If it goes really well, you don't just roll it out to the 100% user base. You increase the ratio slowly and steadily and see how does the market react to it. How does the user base react to it? It might be that 5% of the users you've selected aren't a true representation of the 100%. So once again, there's a whole new there's a whole new stream of conversation on how do you select your users for A/B testing. But slowly increase that ratio so that you've got a true representation in mass of the system before you roll something out. Also on the ownership, the other side of the fence. Let the product community, project community, or client community know that they own the product space. They own the future roadmap. And you're there to guide them through it. Does that sound familiar to anyone? Does that sound familiar, all of that? That's exactly what these guys are doing. And look at it. You have camps happening on Saturdays all over the world. Okay? I've just trekked up from Kent to come and meet you guys and girls and speak to you. Okay? For me, that is up there in terms of successful products with what they've actually achieved. And it's admirable. It's amazing. Now, they've created pockets of communities, they've created continents of communities, they've created a global community that is only concerned about how do I use this product for my benefit and the benefit of my clients? And how do I contribute to this product as a community to make it better all along the road? That's pretty much it. I'm supposed to speak for an hour, but I think I probably bored myself and put myself to sleep if I did that. So thank you very much for having me. There's lots of ramblings on about Agile in tech and non-tech, because I'm a big fan of taking Agile into the non-tech environment. And I've written quite a bit about it, so if you're interested in that, you can check my blog out. I'm speaking at the DSDM conference in June about how do you roll out Agile in a non-tech environment. Thank you very much for listening. Any questions? I hope there are lots. Please.
I say, as a user experience person, I'm really, really happy that you've been talking about the importance of it. So, yay.
My question is do you have a user experience person take it on, or do you just have everyone do it? How do you sort of manage that and the process? Because UX and Agile can be a different, Scrum can be different at different times.
There aren't going to be conflicts of interest. So I'm a freelancer now. In my previous life, when I was running a product company, we had a UX guy. We'd rotate the UX guy across different products. We trained up our UX guy in Agile. And yeah, it was a conflict of interest at times, but slowly and steadily, if you've got a good UX talent or a resource, and they start understanding Agile, there'll be less conflict. And understand that your destination is exactly his or her destination. You're just coming at it from different points of view. And it's just about getting them to understand that, look, you want a better user experience, I want a better user experience, the user wants a better user experience, but we've got to come to a consensus on how the hell we're going to give that to the user. And it's a dialogue. It's a crowdsourced conversation. It isn't a monologue where you go, okay, you're the UX champion, just tell us what to do, and we go and do it. No, it works like that. Please.
Anyway, there was an observation again with what's happening with Drupal now on the technical side. So on the user side, it couldn't be a problem. But on the user side, Microsoft had a transition between the existing community and trying to get a new community within this metro interface. For new users, it was an excellent user experience. My dad loved it. For the existing user base, that was huge. It was very bad. They hated it. In Drupal, we have something similar, but it's technical. People who have used PHP the traditional way with Drupal 6 will not like what Symfony is bringing in. In the long run, it's more sustainable, so it has to be brought in. But you are going to have those pain points. How do you prevent people getting frustrated with your new transition, which you've tested with A/B testing, but they now don't like it and they rather move to another product that maybe has refused to take in?
I can't answer the PHP Symfony question because I'm not technically enough to do that. I'm more
Microsoft questions.
I've spent more of my time as a site builder and an architect, and a solutions designer or a solutions optioner, as I call it. Windows, I can't comment. I'm a Mac guy. I hate Windows. But when it comes to migration, look, it boils down to two simple words: change management. Be it migrating users from Windows X to Windows 8, be it moving from Drupal 7 to Drupal 8, or be it moving from one house to another. It just boils down to change management. Change management is all about setting expectations, managing those expectations, delivering to them, and communicating. So if you feel like it isn't really working out for you, that the migration is creating problems, then maybe the BAs failed everyone or the community's failed itself in communicating those changes out. Or it could be that you're in the minority. I don't know. So you've got to get more of a feeler from the wider community when you're rolling out a change management program. Because look, as human beings, we don't like change. We just naturally don't like change. But we all know that change usually means something better. So what we've got to do is engage with those users, engage with a variety of users that represent the community across the spectrum, be it site builders, be it back-end developers, be it server optimization experts, etc. And then walk them through the changes that are about to come. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, it does answer the question, but the thing is that when you have a very established user base, it actually becomes a problem. That's happened with several projects. When you have a huge community that likes the system as it is, and they do want changes, and you want something radical because you want something that's much better, you don't have this conflict within a huge base that's existing and a new base you want to reach.
Okay, so how many people over here have been playing around with Drupal 8 beta?
Yeah.
Okay. How does it compare with 7? Are you guys happy, or you all feel like Remy does?
I think it's good with 7, like 7 with 6, because they are talking about the migration between 6 to 8 is a huge gap for the programmers. It's okay for the end users. It's actually
It's a steep learning curve.
Exactly.
It sounds to me like it's a steep learning. Would you agree that's a steep learning curve?
I don't think so.
You think so?
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
I think it's easier to learn Symfony as a development tool than it is to learn Drupal 7 as a learning curve. Coming from a software engineering background, like it's object orientated, so it's all standard components. You don't have to remember every hook in your mind because it's all standard.
Okay.
So it's easy.
I think the thing I'd say is, I mean, just talking about the Microsoft thing, it's slightly easy to talk about because you actually see it. Part of what I presume you're talking about is the switch shift from Windows 7 to Windows 8. I think that could have been made better by doing approximately what they did, but putting some things in place so that people who liked it the old way could get a closer experience to the old. So you just reduce the pain of it. And I think that is the example of the whole, which is to say you provide a path. You don't just say, here it is over the fence, not left and unpicked. You think about the pain and you say, what could we do within the new architecture to make it less painful? And that's exactly what Migrate/DTD is doing in saying, okay, you've got your 6 site, you know, we are not going to support upgrade to DM. But what we can do is this. We can say import the content. And yeah, you'll have to reconfigure it, but at least your content's there.
Familiarity always helps. And so if you go to a new place, like when I was in Prague, I tried to make myself familiar with certain landmarks so that I don't get lost every time I'm in the square. Familiarity helps, but sometimes the change is so radical that you don't want anything familiar there. It's kind of like, you know, looking at old Chicago that got burned down and then building new Chicago. You couldn't really bring stuff from the old to the new except for a few things, for instance. So I think, yeah, familiarity helps, but sometimes you can't have those things in there. I'm not the best person to comment on the migration from V7 to V8. Any other questions?
I just going to add one last thing, which is that I think there's a very specific reason why Microsoft from 7 to 8 did not do the things that lots and lots of people were screaming stuff, all that stuff. And that is they wanted to push the developers and the users toward Metro. And they thought, right and wrongly, that if they didn't make it easy to stick with 7, then that's what the developers and the users would be forced to do. Forgetting, perhaps, that actually developers have other options. But, you know, that's essentially that's the game, I think, they're playing. So they wanted to force people over the wall rather than just let them choose.
Is the case with Windows that as a company, Microsoft should I say, they knew they had to bite the bullet and make that jump to move straight to touch, given that they were behind in the race with Apple, and so they just had to make difficult decisions. And I wonder whether there's some comparisons there with the big jump that Drupal's making to Symfony, knowing that jump needs to be made, and the sooner we take it, the better it'll be.
I'm not
I know
the jumps that need to be made.
I know it hasn't been a smooth ride at Microsoft.
But sometimes the best medicine is the most bitter pill.
Except when you use some of the market, because like some of the technical guys, I'm just saying, the risk about the community, if you are on top of the game, like Microsoft thought to be on top of the game, they felt they can force everybody to move. Now, if there are options like Drupal now has to move, which makes sense, but like the majority of sites that are easy to use are still WordPress sites, and WordPress site is really old school PHP. So for you to write a new WordPress site in Symfony, for anybody who was programming WordPress sites, you just abandon it. So it's when the user base is so huge and they are stuck with something and you have a radical shift, you actually end up getting a new user base where you lose your whole old base.
I kind of disagree with that, because the community, specifically talking about Drupal, the community has enough champions within it to convince skeptics and pessimists away from that thinking. So I'm pretty sure there are lots of peers. Lots of peers, exactly.
I love 8 because of Symfony.
Yeah, you've got pains, but then again you're saying you love 8.
Because I was actually going to abandon Drupal if we didn't go to Symfony, because I felt the WordPress style is not sustainable. So
I think when we compare Drupal and WordPress, we're comparing apples and pears. Because I don't want to get into that debate. There's lots of people here who can contribute to that debate much better than I can. But I think you've answered your own question. It boils down to how strong your community is. So if it's if it's a leap of faith, what you need is champions standing at the edge saying, "Go ahead, buddy, jump. I'm telling you, you're going to be fine on the other side. You can't see what you're jumping into, but trust me, you'll be fine." So that comes from creating that bond in that community where the community A trusts you or your product enough to stand up and say, "Look, I'll put my neck out and I'll vouch for it that, yeah, make that leap of faith and you'll be fine." And it comes from the cohesion within the community, where one developer would say to the other that, "Look, seriously, you don't want to do that. You don't want to go towards Typo 3, or you don't want to go towards WordPress for these reasons." So once again, it's about communication, it's about information, and it's about change management. It's managing that journey. Please.
Thanks. Everyone knows about the perils of too much documentation during a project.
Yeah.
What would you advise during a release minimum amount of documentation?
There's a lot of automation you can do around documentation. So it also depends on who your audience is. So for instance, if you're working on a product for a client, then the requirements for documentation are going to be more stringent and they're going to be heavier because the client isn't going to lock himself or herself in with you forever. They will want that documentation, so if they wanted to change suppliers at a later date, it was easier for them. So once again, it boils down to, if it's an internal product, what can you get away with? You know, what's the minimum set you can get away with? Bearing in mind that you might lose your top developers. You know, 2 of them might get poached. You might lose your product owner, God forbid, he or she may get hit by a red bus or whatever colored buses you have on leads. So it boils down to what your aims are. So if you're creating documentation for the sake of backups, for the sake of continuation, then it's a different level of documentation you're talking about. You're creating documentation because you're ISO 27001, and you've got to prove that you can recreate the code within 1 week's time. You're talking about a different set of documentation. But with most clients, what I say is, how much time do you want us to spend on documenting? Because we're going to be billing you for it. So we can run automated documents for you. The code's commented. You've got the sprint planning logs. You've got the burn-up charts, the burn-down charts. You've got your backlog. You've got your completed backlog. You've got your done column documented on your Scrumban board. What else do you want? So I always go back and ask the client, what's the level of documentation do you need? Then, for instance, government clients, they need a lot of documentation. So they'll go like, okay, firstly, I want the feasibility analysis that you conducted before you built this feature. And you go like, oh shit, I didn't do that. I just had a conversation with a couple of 100 users. Yeah, so okay, let's go and document the feasibility analysis. Then they'll be like, okay, so where's your project plan? You go like, my Scrum board. That's my project plan. And they'll be like, is there anything in project? You go like, no. This is how we're doing it. This is Agile, yeah. Scrumban board's got dates on it. We've got a burn-up chart, a burn-down chart. That's how we're documenting. It boils down to what level of documentation. See, for instance, if we were using DSD and Atom to deliver a project, we'd have a resource dedicated to documentation. You know, his or her job would be to talk to us almost on a daily basis and say, okay, what needs to be updated? What do I need to create? What are the new products and artifacts that I need? If it's Scrum, if it's a 4-week project launching a e-commerce store, I go back to the client and say, look, I can spend another 4 weeks documenting everything for you, but it's going to be building. So you tell me, what level of documentation do you need?
Be interested to hear your thoughts, Kubair, as you were describing the process of project delivery. It sounded very applicable to much larger teams, 100,000, 200,000 plus projects maybe. We're a very small agency, 5 people. When I looked at the Drupal organization, who actually pays $100 to sponsor it in the UK, 80% of those companies and individuals are in the 1 to 10 bracket, and the 20%, maybe 10 to 20, there's a few less, 20 plus, 50 plus, hardly anybody. And I guess this is where you kind of carve up Agile to make it work for your organization. What's your thoughts on the small agencies? How can they use Agile to the best effect?
I think Agile can be used by organizations of all sizes. When it comes to larger organizations, you've got to carve up your Agile teams. Because, you know, I've run Agile projects with 4+ people, and I've managed multiple Agile teams where I have 32 in total reporting, working together as multiple teams. When it comes to smaller agencies, I think Agile works better for agencies of that size than it does for the much larger agencies. But one of these issues does become documentation, because the bigger you are, the larger the projects, you start losing the agility. It also depends on the nature of the client. If the client is UK Gov or European Gov, they need, what they want from Agile is very different from what we're going to deliver to them using Agile. When it comes to small organizations, just make sure that you've got a lean setup. You've got someone who knows the rules of Scrum. There's someone who may or may not be a certified Scrum Master, but at the end of the day, can play the role of the Scrum Master. Product owner, make sure that you've got someone with the responsibility of a product owner. Product owner is interchangeable with project manager, because this is the guy who's going to be liaising with the client most of the time, and translating the requirements and essentially holding the corner for the team, but at the same time holding the corner for the client. It's a very conflicting relationship, because you walk out of the client meeting saying, awesome, I'm going to give you that, and you walk in and your team goes, go to hell, you're not getting it. So you've got to go back and say, you know what, I said I was going to give you that, but I really can't. So it's about wearing multiple hats. Yeah, there's this rule that says 7 ± 2. I don't really agree with that. Why? Because I've seen slightly larger teams doing Agile and doing it really well. And I've seen 3 4-man teams. Yeah. That smaller team size doing Agile really well. A good habit to get into is, for instance, do Scrum Ban votes for everything. Yes, do Scrum Ban votes for your UI graphic designer. So say that's your sprint. You know, we've got our own Kanban board in our own kitchen, which we kind of like use, and you know, my 80-year-old's getting to grips with how it actually works. So it's about being comfortable with what you're practicing. So if you keep Agile locked up in a closet that you bring out every time you win a contract or a project that's worth over 10 grand, it's going to cause you problems. So you use parts of Agile which are relevant for a 2 grand bill, right up to a 200,000 or 200 million pound project. And as I said, it's the right tool for the right job. So when you talk about long-term, huge projects, you move into DSDM territory, more documentation, more structure, more governance. Smaller projects, you're more in Scrum Ban territory, less governance, dare I say, less structure. Please.
I was actually sort of carry on from that comment. I don't know too much about it. I know my work, we have a very small team doing Agile, and I think to make it that if you take 2 or 3 or 4 years working on, one thing which I do know they do is they're in contact with like weekly sort of catch up with the client. And I think a lot of it is just constant communication, because obviously if you're smaller, then if something goes off the rail, you know, if something's going to be a problem, you've got to obviously get back to them. So I think that's the main thing that they do, and I think also if you're keeping contact with the client, weekly video calls, hopefully that sort of can also minimize documentation. It's not so much an issue. So I think it's having to talk more if you're.
Yeah. It boils down to communication. What I just add to that is, if it's a small team working very closely with the client, talk to the client after you're 10 minutes stand-up anymore, because that's where you identify the problems you're going to face in doing X. And one of the actors in that equation is the client. And in my experience, 6 out of 10 times is the client who can solve that problem for you. 4 out of 10 times, it's either management or either the product owner who can solve that problem for you. So a small team, you'll always have one person leading on the client engagement. Is that person's role, pick the phone up, Skype, whatever, and say, Alistair, we've run into this problem. This is how we're thinking of solving it. What's your opinion? So like, one thing I always say to my consultants, and I try and practice myself, is whenever I go to the client or my reports or my board or whoever I'm reporting to, I go to them with one problem with 3 likely options that are a solution to that problem. Because if you don't, then you're just lazy. Because I hate it when my consultants come and go, hey, Kubair, I've got this problem, what do you think? I'm like, dude, I'm in the middle of something else. I don't want to think about your problem. What are your options? I haven't really thought about that. So what I say is, always go to the client and say, that's my challenge. These are the 3 options I'm thinking about. All 3 of them might be really crap. But the point is, you've got 3 options. And whenever I get someone coming to me and saying, that's the problem, these are the 3 options I'm thinking about, it just helps me along. I don't have to think as hard about the 3 options because I'm not starting from a blank piece of paper. I just go with option 2, or how about if you chop and change? So it boils down to communication. Like, clients hate being bothered on a daily basis with problems. So if that is the case, try and condense all the problems into maybe a call a week, where you catch up with them on, what I prefer to do is not make that call on a Friday.
That's Tuesday morning.
Exactly, that makes more sense. Because if you do it on a Friday, you get solutions, you get the client worried, A, over the weekend, and B, you go away, come back on Monday, and you've forgotten 20% of what was going to happen anyway. So midweek is the best time. Any more questions?
What software can you recommend? What software did you use for project management?
Okay, so I am not, I'm platform agnostic. So I will use Trello, I will use Redmine, I will use Pivotal. I will use whatever the client and the team is comfortable. Back in the days when I had my own team, I had my own products, we used Redmine. Now I work with Jira, I work with Redmine, I work with whatever the client has, because I can't go in and say, you know what, I only work with Redmine and Trello, so I'm not going to work with your team unless you guys migrate. And to be honest, the choices out there are ridiculous. You spoil the choice.
I think we've got to wrap up in a sec. I just have one question about, okay, say you've got a 6-month relationship with a client, but they are now the dominant person in that relationship by far. How would you suggest going about reversing that relationship so you have more say in deadlines and things like that?
I'd first look at what happened that made them the dominant partner in the relationship. Where did I lose ground? Where did my team lose ground? And then I'd try and retake some of that ground. So there's no silver bullet. You can't just turn up one day and say, okay, you know what, from this day onwards, we're going to be the alphas. It's not going to work. So you've got to say, you've got to say, okay, so where exactly in this timeline did we lose ground? And how do we regain that ground? It might be that they hired a CTO who's got more domain knowledge, for instance, than my team does. In which case, I've got to get this guy on board. Everyone here probably heard of, but how many people here have seen 12 Angry Men? Yeah? That's like my line for everything, right? So if you're trying to sell to people, you've got to watch that movie. If you're trying to gain the upper hand in a client relationship, or at least get on par and balance, watch that movie. Why? Because it's all about communication and how do you sell to different people. So the story goes, jury of 12, one guy thinks he's not guilty, 11 people think he's guilty. Every one of these 11 people has to be handled differently, and it's all about how do you handle those 11 different characters. There's the same thing with the client. Is you identify your jury. So you go like, okay, so we lost ground to the CDO. New CDO came in, wants something completely different, very aggressive timelines, etc., etc. How do we handle them? Get to know the person. I'd start with an empathy. So I'd analyze where did we lose ground. I'd develop an empathy map of that individual or of that jury. There's an article on my blog on empathy maps, by the way. And I'd start over there. So I'd identify that person's pain points, and then I'd approach them likewise. Because everyone's different, right? So 6 months into a relationship, you lose ground. It might be because you got engaged with a larger client, and you weren't spending enough time with Jerry. Now thinks you're not his BFF. It's silly things. Sometimes it's the most smallest of things, the most simplest of things that can get you back on track with a client. Like one thing I always do, even if I don't have an active project with a client, drop them an email once a month, phone call. Once a quarter, make sure that you have, or we just go and hang out. We just bump into them. So, camps are awesome places to do that because our clients are in our community. So it's brilliant. We can meet some of our clients in the community at camps, at cons, which is another aspect of that community thing that I was talking about. So make your client part of your community and be a part of their community. And you know what? There's going to be friction in every community. And there's going to be, everyone on your client's board is not going to love you. In fact, most people on client boards might end up hating you because you're a strong personality. But a few people will hold your corner because they'll go, You know what? This guy makes us money. This guy delivers on time. So that's what I would do. How angry man, empathy matters. Thank you very much, Rob.
Good questions,
Really good questions.
yeah.